Here's a Tumblr entry from the user The Fox Beast. To be completely honest, I've grown very discouraged about the state of radical feminism. Radblur is saturated with women calling themselves radical feminists who have the barest grasp on what that phrase means. Being gender critical is great, but that is only one small facet of radical feminism. I think this is probably because many radfems now are just former libfems who have peak transed, but many of them treat radical feminism like a queer identity, like it's something you can call yourself that others have to believe despite having little basis in reality. Women are calling themselves radfems who have never read Dworkin, Hooks, Butler, McKinnon, Steinem, Daly, Wollstonecraft, etc. They don't know anything about second-wave feminism and radical feminist theory. Just 10 years ago, you would never encounter a woman who called herself a radfem who was not PIV critical. Now, many radfems don't even know the meaning of the phrase. You wouldn't find a radfem who wasn't anti-capitalist. You wouldn't find a radfem who was a proponent of organized religion, because nearly all organized religions are patriarchal. You wouldn't find a radfem who didn't understand how powerfully female socialization affects women's political views. It seems to me that many of the so-called radical feminists on Tumblr only agree with radical feminism in so much as they acknowledge that trans women are men and can never be women. I'm tired of radfems who have no feminist consciousness and who aren't even particularly radical. We are not liberals, moderates, conservatives, or reactionaries. We are leftist radicals. Stop calling yourself radical if you have no grasp of the meaning of the word or the history it infers. I'm just tired. Radfem is another word that has lost much of its meaning and coherence because of misuse and ignorance. I don't mean to sound like a rambling purist, but there you have it. I could not agree more with her. I have talked about this in other videos of mine. I'll link them in the end of this video, I guess. About how... Oh, you know what? Also, Terry Strange has a good video on radical feminists versus radfems that I agree with a lot. And yeah, I use radfem as shorthand because it's whatever. It's easier, it's simpler. But I think it also does a disservice to us to use that term because people who call themselves radfems these days are just women who genuinely do hate trans people. They're not particularly feminist in any way. They're not critical of femininity. They're not critical of childbearing and child rearing. They're not critical of heterosexual partnering. They're not critical of marriage, religion, gender roles for women. They're not educated in any way on the pillars of radical feminism, but they call themselves radfems because they think that that's what it means. That's what it is when you genuinely don't like trans people, and that is not what radical feminism is. We're critical of gender as a concept or an innate identity. We don't hate trans people. So I definitely should get in the habit of not saying radfem and using the full-on radical feminist, because the Fox Beast is right. It's lost its meaning and coherence completely because of appropriation. And that's not to say that women need to spend hours of their lives reading all of these books by the women that the Fox Beast named in this post. But, you know, at least the Cliff's Notes version. Like, come on. You're not a radical feminist if you are religious, if you worship any of the Abrahamic religions especially. You're not a radical feminist if you aren't critical of the power structure innate to a male-female partnership relationship, I guess, connection, I don't know. You're not a radical feminist if you are not critical of femininity and the ways in which it harms not only yourself individually, but women as a class. I could go on, but I will put in the description box some links to where you can read a lot of radical feminist literature in PDF form for free. Please do so.